To the Informal Cities Workshop. I'll offer just an overview of the workshop for those of you who are new to it, and then on to our guest, Ms. Gita Mehta. The workshop, now entering its 6th year, is a 1-credit master class, offered every fall semester. Those of you taking it now, you're able to retake it again next year if you'd like. It is a hands-on workshop where students will collaboratively grapple with developing social spatial designs within an informal urban context. It is messy, temporal, and fluid. The students will learn through building both large physical models and through conversation around the design prompts. Each year, we invite an accomplished designer who has actively practiced at the intersection of design and informality to facilitate the weekend workshop. The locations and themes change each year, pivoting around the contextual peculiarities of the chosen city, which have up to now included Lima, Cape Town, Joburg, Rio, and now Varanasi in India. The goal of the workshop is to directly invite the students to broaden their understanding of their own roles, responsibilities, and agency as a designer. Informality is the future. Over 1 billion people live in informality, and according to the UN, it is in fact the only form of growth that has continuously increased since 1900. This workshop challenges the students to articulate a design response that embraces temporality and that defies the notion of a singular author of the built form. I believe it's imperative that the students actively investigate this territory because in this room are the designers that will be responsible for creating the cities of 2050, where we will add 2.3 billion people to the population. So on to this year's site, Varanasi. I'll offer just a brief paragraph on it. It's a city of 1 billion and growing. It's the spiritual capital of India, and its population swells and dissipates just like the fluvial neighbor of the river Ganges. The city captures many of the complexities that our designers, us in the room, will have to grapple with during their professional practices. Extreme inequality. Varanasi has 207 slum areas. An increase of extreme and intense weather, simultaneously creating both too much and too little water, all within a growing city with limited resources. So enter Ms. Gita Mehta, a designer, professor, entrepreneur, and author who is practicing the principles in which the workshop is grounded. We're honored to have you here in St. Louis today as the guest professor for the 6th Informal Cities Workshop. If you'll allow me, I'll offer just a brief snippet into your accolades. I know there are many more, but I'm going to try and keep it concise. Ms. Gita Mehta is an adjunct professor of architecture and urban design at Columbia University. She's the founder and president of Asia Initiatives, a nonprofit organization that supports over 200 microcredit banks, 40 village knowledge centers, and education and technology in India and other developing countries. She has also developed the concept of social capital credits, the social good currency that is currently in use in India, Ghana, Kenya, and Washington, D.C., which I'm sure you'll hear more about today. In addition to that, she's also the co-founder of URBS, User Generated City, a group formed in 2008. They're an experimental action and research collective specializing in participatory planning and design, active in many parts of the globe. In addition to all the aforementioned, Gita is also recognized as one of the 21 leaders of the 21st century by Women's E-News in 2015. She serves on an advisory board for waterfront development in New York City, is an advisor to the Center for Sustainable Urban Development, and a board member for the Center for Living Cities and Women Strong International. We're honored to have you here, Gita, and without further ado, please help me welcome Gita Mehta.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Before I start, I want to get to know you. How many of you are from St. Louis? Can you please raise your hand? Thank you. And how many of you are from, let's say, the rest of the United States? Thank you. And how many of you are from China? Thank you. How many from India? How many from South America? Africa? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try and talk about the building of social capital by design, because I think one thing that's really, really problematic in our times is that we are just counting money too seriously. So we are thinking that's the only kind of capital, and that is really hurting what is happening to our world, to our ecology, to our society. And so I see that as a real issue. And I think architects have an important role here. Urban designers, planners have an important role here. So I'm going to dwell on that. Because I think architecture and urban design are social endeavors, they must have a social purpose. Much too long, actually, since the start of, let's say, modernism, people have been building beautiful models and looking at them from the top and designing buildings, but not really looking at buildings as user experience, right? So I think that now that we are smarter than the masters who led modernism, I don't know, but that's something seriously to think about. That what is the social purpose of the work we do? What is the social purpose of our building? And Matthew talked about agency. You have real agency, and if there's one thing I want you to remember from this workshop and this lecture is your agency, because it really you are the visionaries. It is architects actually who rallied around money and people and built the cathedrals in Middle Ages, garden cities, then of course modernism, and then now what is our social purpose? Our purpose is to design for social capital and for social justice, and the world really needs that right now, and I think we have some agency in doing that. So because you can visualize a better tomorrow. Developers are great at making money and putting together pieces of a development, but you use your imagination. That is the most precious resource that you have. Everything you learn about architecture, urban design is to synthesize, to take everything, the history, the financial situation, the climate, and put it all together into your vision. And do not underestimate that unique ability. Very few people have it. You learn to do it, you have it, and you must use it to create inclusive public spaces, housing, public transportation, cities that are socially inclusive, designed for informality, and designed for social capital. So why now? What is the urgency? And it is urgency. I want you to realize how urgent your task is today. 0.1% of the people in the United States own more than the bottom 90%. I believe that Facebook alone, the net worth of Facebook alone is more than the net worth of 90 countries at the bottom. So this is the period we are living in. So it's really urgent what you do about this inequality. Over 100 million people are expected to lose jobs to automation, artificial intelligence, and due to climate change. So who are we designing for? What will be the people who will live in the buildings that you design, in the cities that you design? What will be their jobs? Will they have jobs, or will they just be getting a direct cash transfer? Which I think is a really bad idea, but many people are talking about that. People at the back, can you please come and sit? There are lots of chairs here. Please, and I'm not scary, you can come. More of you can come. See, she was brave. Can you follow her? So, so the level of inequality in the United States is not unique, but it is particularly bad. Recently, an apartment sold for $238 million, one apartment, really who needs it? And a lot of these apartments that are sold in these super luxurious buildings, people don't even live throughout the year. So that is the upper end of the problem we are looking at. And then there is, of course, a huge layer of Americans who can just barely make ends meet, who are living at the edge of bankruptcy, actually. So that is the situation. Can we do something about it? So this is, I don't know if you've heard about or seen Hudson Yards. How many of you had heard about Hudson Yards? Can you raise hands? So this is this super chic, super expensive development in New York City built on what was Penn Station railroads. And so it's like when a new tourist comes to New York, you take them there. Well, I don't, but some people do. And it's this really hotshot development with the real estate prices 125% of the rest of the city. But what is it for? What is the purpose of it? And what is it doing to the city? In my book, a building is a good building if many buildings like that would make a good city. Otherwise, for me, it's not a good building. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is. So on that count, Hudson Yard kind of fails because they cut off the city. They created this little rich enclave. And the crime of it is that 1.6 billion of the subsidy that should have gone for developing employment went to Hudson Yards, and totally the taxpayers subsidized it by about $6 billion. So this is the gerrymandering that happened. So Central Park is no employment, right? Is that a bad thing? Yeah, Forest Park, does it have employment? No, but they included that in it to calculate the numbers. And they included Harlem, and they said unemployment in this segment is really low, so we need subsidies to increase the employment. So this is the kind of politicking that has gone on. And then they have shopping centers. Do you need shopping centers in cities? Like, shopping centers eat up the shopping street, right? They get people off the street. Street is the ultimate public space. Everybody can be on the street. It's the most powerful part of your city. Do not forget that. But if you make shopping malls, you swoop up all that vitality and you put it inside a building, air-conditioned or not, and then you hurt the city. So when you design, think about what you are doing to the city. What is your building going to do to the city? Is it going to build social capital, or is it going to destroy social capital? And you will ask me, what is social capital that I'm talking about? Social capital is the ability of people to come together to work towards a common goal. And the great thing is that very often the common goal is achieved, but the fact that people come together already improves their well-being and their happiness. So social capital is really a very important part of capital we should think about when we think about cities. There is amazing amount of social injustice in the world today, and it doesn't need to be. There's so much liquid wealth in the world today that is looking for places to go, but we are not putting it where things need to go. I think your studios have worked in South Africa, right? So this is Cape Town, but the story is everywhere. And the big story in America, United States, is actually the story of corporate capture, which also is like a dark Halloween type of scary story, actually. Right? Did anybody enjoy Halloween? Yes? This is more scary than what you might have seen at Halloween, because it's eating into our healthcare, into environment, into agriculture, into cities. Would you believe that there are only 6 companies in the United States that have a near monopoly on all the seeds, agricultural seeds in the United States? And they will, so that means every year the farmer has to buy new seed from them, Monsanto and others. But if the farmer tries to save their own seed, it's illegal. Why is it illegal? Because the farmer will say, well, I never bought your seed, but Monsanto will say, but some of the breeze from the other fields might have blown seed into your field, so I'm going to sue you for it. And they have more lawyers than scientists. So that is the scale of corporate capture, and you already know about healthcare and other things. This is like a super serious, scary problem right now. So let us think about how this scary problem translates into housing. Are we building or destroying social capital by the type of housing we are designing? Let's start from far away, because when it's far away, nobody said they were from South South America, so let me start there. So it's not so threatening right now, but it is threatening actually. But this is in Mexico, but this model of housing is happening all over South America. And the model is well-intentioned. The model is that we need low-income housing, so how are we going to build it? So the government says, in this new neoliberal model, the government says, you know, the private sector is better at doing this. So we are just going to give money. We're going to create an instrument, so we are going to put a lot of money in it, and developers will be able to borrow it for very, very low interest, and we will tell them to go build housing. Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? Can you raise hands who thinks it's a good idea? Who thinks it's a bad idea? Why is it a bad idea? Because the developers, what is their bottom line? It's money, right? So if you're a developer and you want to make a lot of money, and the government says, okay, you go build 6,000 houses. Where are you going to build them? On the cheapest land you can find. Where will that cheapest land be? It will be the farmland, right? So out of the city, farmland, buy that cheap land, urbanize it, build your 6,000 houses, collect the money, go laughing to the bank. End of story. Who can live there? So many of them are abandoned because there are no jobs here. People's jobs are in the city. So now you push the poor people out of the city and you expect them to commute 2 hours into the city, spend money on commuting, spend time on things that they don't have, right? So you're putting a poverty penalty on them. So really good intention, but badly done. You have to remember that free market is very good, but free market is very good, let's say, at making bread in the cheapest way possible. But free market is not good at making sure that everyone who needs bread gets it. Right? So free market has its uses. Free market has its power. You can harness greed through free market. But we have to be aware of what is happening. So this is exactly what is happening. Free market knows how to make housing in the cheapest way possible, but they have no clue about the social capital here. Where are people going to work? What is their community? Where are their shopping streets? Where are their meeting places? Where will they rub shoulders with people of other income groups? That's what a city is about. A city is about diversity. A city is about opportunity for all. This is not it, right? And this is happening to this extent and more in Brazil, for example. Brazil has just built, I think, 6 million homes with this formula. It's a good formula. But the really good thing, coming back to the agency of architects, is that recently, with much public effort by architects, now the government is saying that if I give you money at very low interest, you have to hire architects to develop the concept before you build it, right? So once the architects get in, they might ask some of the hard questions that were not asked here. But you are in the university, and your job is to learn those questions, and your job is to learn that if you are in that situation, what do you do? How do you turn this around? This is great potential, right? But how are you going to turn it around so it becomes a vibrant part of the city that builds social capital and is good for people, right? So that's a great responsibility for you all and a great opportunity. What is happening in South America is happening actually in many places. This is India, any number of gated communities. And once again, the demand for, in India actually, there's huge unmet demand for middle income housing and even much greater demand for low income housing. So the developers in India were making very big profits. What do you think is an average profit that a developer in the United States makes on a project? Can somebody suggest a number? Give me a percentage of the project.
30%.
30? Anybody else? 20, 25, anybody else?
Is the mafia involved or?
Yeah, let's just focus on the developer for a moment. Yes, you are not far from, there is often, well, in In certain kind of land clearings, there is mafia involved. But an average developer who's law-abiding in the United States maybe will be happy with 12 to 15%. Maybe. It used to be more. It used to be 20, 25, but not anymore. But in India, people were making 400% profit. You know? Yeah. In China, it was up to like 50, 70%. Why is that happening? Because they can just go out, get farmland, which is really, really cheap to get, urbanize it, and the demand is so much, they will make people pay for the apartment before it's designed even. Just the intention, and people will pay you money, so you don't even need to get a loan from the bank. So this was going, and now there is a government agency that controls it. But till now, it was like a free-for-all. Free-for-all meaning in a really bad way, that these gated communities were chopping up. There were big chunks of the city that were not following the street grid or the street pattern, and common people were not even allowed to go inside. So this was like a really bad model of urban development, but I'm afraid to say it's happening in so many countries right now. Iran, there's an article in this issue of New Yorker. It's really a very serious, dangerous kind of urban development model that is happening. And in China as well. In China, it is on steroids, because China has done everything in bigger and faster way than anywhere else. And this is a huge issue in China, the super blocks, right? So the government will take huge swaths of land and give it to one developer who quickly develops it. And what's the, this is not the modernist dream. This is just because it's the cheapest and fastest thing to do. Modernist dream of tall buildings, and I'll come to that in a minute, had some philosophy. Now we know it wasn't great, but it had some philosophy behind it. This is just money. So in India and in many countries, there is slum redevelopment schemes. And the ones for the rich people look like on your right, and the one for poor people look like on your left. So this is actually, we are creating intergenerational inequity. The people who will grow up here in these, it will take generations to heal, right? Like in the United States, the really bad public housing that got built, it's going to take generations to heal those families, if ever. Some might never rebound from that. One of the most famous, most studied slums in India is in Mumbai. It's called Dharavi. Petra, my colleague, we were there together working on it. And so you see the social inequity is huge. And is it unsolvable? It's not. It's just, I think, lack of imagination and political commitment. So what happens in Dharavi is very interesting, that Hindus, Christians, Jewish people, Muslims, they all live together in this big slum. Nobody knows how many people live there. Some people think it's 600,000. Some people say it's 800,000. They used to think it's 1 million, but they did some kind of survey, so now the number is between 6 and 8. But they live quite harmoniously. And on this street, on Friday evenings, they close half the street, and it becomes a mosque. People come and they face west, and they do their prayers, and then they get up and go away. The street gets opened again. Then maybe it's going to be closed for a Christian festival or a Hindu festival. And so there is this kind of a social dance that goes on between communities. They talk to each other, and they respect each other's wishes. I think that is amazing social capital. But because Dharavi is in the middle of development now, every developer wants to bulldoze it. Every developer would love to bulldoze it and put high-income housing there, because now the city has grown around it. It's in the middle of the city. So it's very prime real estate land. But the question is, what will happen if these people's social capital will go away? What is this social capital worth to the city, right? We have to begin to think of that. So this is inside from the top. It looks little scary, but at the bottom, it looks like this. People know each other's, they know their neighbors, the children play there, and they are watched for by older people around the neighborhood. These are real neighborhoods with real social capital. And micro public spaces are very critical in low-income communities. And if you're going to swoop them up and put them in a high-rise and think everybody's going to live happily ever after, well, that's not going to happen. So with URBS, we map the social networks where the public spaces are, how do people interact with each other, and try to define the social capital of the Ravi. This was an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art on housing, and we were invited to present our work in the Ravi. And we said that street is the ultimate public space, and it is the ultimate creator of social capital. So we are all about street-based urbanism. And if you swoop them all and put them in a shopping mall, bad idea, right? And I know that in New Jersey right now, they're building the biggest shopping mall of all, which has a ski slope and a circus and all sorts of crazy things. But really, please leave the street alone. The shopping street is such an important part of the city. So you all must, I'm sure that you were forced to read Jane Jacobs. Was anybody forced to read Jane Jacobs yet? Can you raise hands? Yes? So, no, very important reading, because at the time that she was writing, what was happening in America was that, let's do slum clearance, let's do slum redevelopment. We know the answer. Let's get all these, run highways through these poor neighborhoods, so to totally destroy them and then put people in tall buildings. And then she was very much for it when she started. And then slowly, she saw what was happening, and it was really she became completely against it. There's actually a recent movie called Citizen Jane. Has anyone seen it? Did you see me in it? Because I got to make my spiel in it. Okay, let's go back to Corbusier, right? Corbusier and his contemporaries were extremely articulate, but they were passionate. They were passionate about what they believed, and what they believed was that modernism is a new ism. Ism is a very dangerous word. Anytime you see ism after any word, you should be careful, right? You must question that, whether it's Hinduism or modernism or any ism. Isms are bad, right? So anyway, modernism was, their philosophy was that now it's the age of democracy. So architecture should be the architecture of democracy. It should be, now we have concrete, we have steel, so we have these magic materials, and we are going to put everyone into high rises so there won't be huddled masses in Liverpool. They will have access to clean air and sunlight, and they believed that. We know now that that was naive and not very good way to think. But at that time, it must have sounded so brilliant that the whole world bought into it. So this was a competition that happened in Paris to redesign the center of Paris. And Corbusier's proposal was, let's drop bombs in the center of Paris, clean it up, and put towers in the park there. Who thinks it's a good idea? Can you raise hands? Who thinks it's a bad idea? And who doesn't want to think? You have to take positions. Being in university is that you have to take positions. You have to learn to tell right from wrong. And don't be shy. If you're shy now, when will you put your foot in your mouth? Right? This is the chance to make mistakes, to really make mistakes, think wrong. Then you will, please at least take positions, okay? So here we are, right? So I don't think Corbusier ever thought that was going to happen, but he was like a showman. He knew that his wild ideas will get him the press, like our president right now knows how to get press, right? So he knew how to get press, how to get everybody psyched up about something or the other. But he and his compatriots really believed that this was the solution. And now it's the most fashionable thing to beat up on Corbusier, right? to say that, oh, what did they know? They were designing from the top. Bauhaus, they just had their anniversary, right? Bauhaus anniversary. Did anybody cut a cake for that? I'm sure Petra did. Right, so now we know that I was wrong. Why is it so wrong? Because now it's happening, not because of any philosophy, but it is happening because it's the cheapest and fastest thing to do, and it's all about money, right? So is speculative urbanism happening in China on steroids? Because China can do anything, right or wrong, faster and bigger than anyone. True? Anybody from China would agree with that? Yes, right? They can do it faster and bigger, right? If a mistake has to be made, let's make it 10 times bigger. Right? So that's what they're doing. Because, when I used to live in Japan, I lived in Japan for 23 years actually. And I went to a conference in Shanghai. It was, I think, in 1990 or something like that. And the planners presented Pudong. And everybody was laughing. No, they are never going to be able to do it. And within 10 years, it happened, right? But also what happened is this, right? So what do you think has been the longest traffic jam in the world? What has been the longest traffic jam in terms of time? Make a guess.
10 years.
I'm going home. Okay, anybody else? Not 5 years, not 10 days. Less than that and more than that. Huh? More than that. More than that. And does anybody in China know about that?
33 days.
I want somebody, are you from China? You look like it. Okay, I want somebody from China to tell me how long was it and where did it happen? So it lasted 2 months because what happened is that it lasted for a full day and people said, oh, it'll get over, it'll get over. They got out of their cars and they danced and they played ball. It didn't get better. So after a few days, they just abandoned their cars and they went home. Huh? This was in Beijing, actually. So then it took 2 months to clear that, right? But why is it happening? I mean, who's thinking that, right? Why is the housing out in the farmland? Why are cars are such a prestigious issue in China and in India? Everyone aspires to own a car. It doesn't matter what the car is going to do to your city and the world, but people really want to have a car because it's a prestige symbol, right? So then that's what you get. That's what you get. So housing is being built way outside. People want cars, they get cars. And, when we started to talk to, actually, I've had a chance to do like 10 projects in China. And when we bring up public transportation and they say, oh, but China is a big car manufacturing company, we cannot dampen that. So we have to build highways, we have to support. And the same thing is happening in India. The car industry is so lucrative, so the government doesn't want to ban that. And then people who pour concrete love to pour concrete. So, everybody's making money, but this is what we are getting. So are we looking at things from the social capital point of view? We are not, but we need to. And as you might have heard of the ghost cities in China, these are cities that got built up, but not responding to any need for housing. There is great need for housing, but not where these got built, right? These get built wherever the Communist Party says build it, and people build it. But it's not responding to a need, so oftentimes they stay empty. Okay, we are in St. Louis, and St. Louis is such a case study for what not to do, how to destroy social capital, right? It really is. So we are here, so we should look at it. How can we reverse it? So of course we know about Jim Crow laws, and we know that segregation, and and really institutionalization of the discrimination. This is a case study of that. And it's a very serious case study. So you all know about Pruitt-Igoe? Yes? Who doesn't? Raise hands. Everyone knows. Who does? Raise hands. Okay, because I'm noticing some people are not raising their hands. I'm making a note of that. So my question and my proposition to you is, what happened in Pruitt-Igoe did not have so much to do with design. Yes? Why?
Yes.
Why?
Because they're just, I've been here a long time, so I've been talking over people, hearing a lot, so it's been a lack of investment in servicing it.
Exactly, exactly. So it's not about design, it's also about social capital. And I want to give you an amazing example in Japan. Exact same kind of building, exact same, completely thoughtless. I mean, who designs that? It's some engineers who probably, right? Not architects, right? You agree? Architects would never do that. Yes? But a famous architect did actually, right? Right? Pruitt-Igoe was Minoru Yamasaki, right? Very well-known architect. So, but not you. You will never do it, right?
Hungry architects will do for developers. They pay well.
I think that that's a really important, and I want to repeat what you said because we need to counter that. She said hungry architects will do whatever the developer tells them to do. No, this is super serious, but also like, I'm very grateful that Matthew has been driving me around this morning, and we were talking about how can architects grab that agency and also have a share in the economic pie. So they are more in the decision-making position. So I want to come back. That's actually really, really important point. But in Japan, the exact same building style, building way was so celebrated and it's so successful. You know, people, so after the World War, when Japan was totally destroyed, so then they were rising out of the ashes and, industrialization and double-digit growth and all that. And they were saying that, so the dream was, this is called danchi. Danchi simply means a big housing development. So this is social housing. And so the dream was to go live in a danchi. And when people went to the danchi, the crown prince would open it and it would be big fanfare. Look at what your government is able to do for you. You have a running water in your apartment. You have a toilet that works. You have a sink, stainless steel sink. I mean, these were amazing things and people were so proud to be there. People were so proud to be there, but if you look at Pruitt-Igoe, people were so ashamed because this said, you are poor, which is why you are here. The American dream is to have a single family house in the suburb, but we are putting you there because you are poor. And people hate to be labeled poor. And then there was no social capital, no way to bring people together, to make them realize of what the opportunity was, or for them to participate in the maintenance because the vandalism was terrible, right? So it's not just about building form, it's about social capital. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you design, can you also design so your built form and your architecture will bring people together, will make social capital, right? So important. So it's not just about form making. So of course, St. Louis is the most segregated city in the United States. We know all about redlining. We know about how people who are already disadvantaged have been disadvantaged more and more. And the point is, how can we learn from it? And where do we go from there? I had a chance a couple of years ago to work in Sao Paulo. And I was telling Matthew a story, so I'm going to repeat it for you. But one of my students, Petra knows her. And so she, after she finished, she graduated from our program, she didn't have a job. So she just worked with the professor in St. Louis, and he said, okay, why don't you document all the unoccupied buildings? And she was a Gabi, right? So Gabi was a very good student, and she did very diligent documentation of all the tall buildings, their floor plans, their sections, and everything. And that book got in the hand of homeless people. Because there's a huge issue of homelessness in Sao Paulo, but there's also more than 100 buildings in a downtown that are abandoned. Right? So now these people organize, they hire armed guards, and they go and attack the buildings at night. So let's say we are all homeless. So we are going to look at this architect's plan, even hire architecture students, and say, you will have apartment number 306. The laundry will be on 7th floor. The barber shop will be on 8th floor. They organize everything, and then at night with the armed guards, they go and attack, and they occupy these buildings. And in the morning, they love Che Guevara, you see? So yeah, he's everywhere on the buildings, and then they have their own signs, and next morning you wake up and the building is occupied. And some of these buildings are right next to the mayor's office. And there's nothing that the mayor or anyone can do about it because they hire very serious armed guards. So what I'm trying to say is, how are you going to deal with this level of social inequity and disempowerment? Right? It could be that it turns into violence. And it has turned into violence in St. Louis and many other places, right? But do we have better solutions? Can we design so it doesn't come to that? One of the buildings actually caught fire, and we don't know whether it was arson, because the owners of the building want to get that land at least back, right? So sometimes they will set fire to these things. But these are very violent solutions, but as designers, what is our agency? What can we do? Let me know if I'm going too long. So one example, Petra and I, we worked also in Medellin in Colombia, and that was like, St. Louis has very high murder rate, right? And Medellin was called the murder capital of the world. And then they were able to turn around their situation and become the most innovative city in 2012. And they won over New York, actually. New York was also the finalist, but Medellin won that year. And what did they do? They actually, many of you may not think that the building on the right is beautiful, but it doesn't matter, right? They said our most beautiful buildings will be in our poorest neighborhoods. And so that building and they did worldwide architectural competitions, and they built these, they call them libraries, but they're not just libraries. They are community centers, they are job training centers, internet centers, there's theater, right? There's play, and they're very high end, actually. We were quite impressed, right? Do you want to add something about that?
No, I think you're right. I think first people were really put off by this, what is this foreign object in our neighborhood? But I think the program actually was really well taken because it gave opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's the key, that they discussed this. It was done in conversation with the community. It wasn't something that parachuted down, but it was very much community participation. And then because these hilltops are made of mud and there are a lot of mudslides, and there was very little way to safely come down. So they built these tramways, and that enabled people to come down and get jobs and go to school and so on. So they were really able to turn around their situation. So social urbanism, right? Social urbanism is the kind of urbanism that helps create social capital. And this is very interesting because as they built more and more social infrastructure, the murder rate and the crime rates came down. Singapore is another example of that we can learn from. So Singapore is, of course, unlike United States, they are not so hyper neoliberal. But they actually don't give any land to any developer. They continue to own the land. They will give lease, which means they'll always have control over what is built. The other really important thing that I was saying in the case of Japan, is the perception. What is social housing? They will get really good architects to develop really good social housing. This is social housing, and when the mayor of Singapore gives his annual State of the Union or State of the whatever, State of Singapore address, he gives it from this building. So social housing has a very happy, very proud connotation, as opposed to something that, oh my gosh, I'm so poor, I have to live in social housing. You know, so that makes a big difference. How about public transport? So what is smart transport? Especially I've been driving around with Matthew in St. Louis, and cars are at the top, right? The pyramid is opposite. But it really should be pedestrians. I must say, I haven't seen so many pedestrians here. And the public transport should be next, and then freight and private motor cars should be at the bottom. And this is like super, super important in how you design urban areas. In Mumbai, it used to be that 88% of the trips were on foot or bike or public transport, and that's now reducing because the public transport is not adequate enough. I started to go to China in 1986, something like that. So there used to be so many bicycles on the road, so many bicycles. And I would talk to urban planners, and they would say, Dr. Mehta, please don't worry, we will get them off. And I would say, please, why do you want to get them off? And it's true, they got them off. Now there are very few bicycles. But now, because Northern Europe is doing it, Netherlands is doing it, they are bringing that back. But it's very hard to bring them back because you had it, right? And in India, we had it. But instead of building infrastructure for the cyclist and the non-motorized transport, there was such an obsession with building infrastructure for cars. But it's something to know. And about women, we completely forget about women when we design cities, right? So gender-sensitive cities, particularly public transportation. I know so many very bright young women in India who have graduated on the top of their classes. They will not do a job because they don't have decent public transportation to get them anywhere. So it's a huge waste of resource, so think about designing for them. So I don't know, in the future, maybe there'll be foldable cars or auto, what is it? Self-driving cars or something. But the theme or the philosophy has to be there that the cars are the lowest priority. In Delhi, actually, they built very good MRT, rapid transport. And can you believe it that the cars, as you can see, they were so against losing that one lane to MRT. They just they pushed politically so hard that now that rapid bus transport has been dismantled. Even the design of our roads, even the design of our sidewalks, we are making it so easy for the car to turn, although the car can turn a sharper corner. And the picture on your right is the colors are all that has been recuperated for the pedestrians, right? So even our roads are designed in a very thoughtless way for cars, but we need to design for people and for social capital. How about environment justice? This is the studio you're going to do, Varanasi. It's a glorious, amazing, amazing city, but then when the river rises and it floods, it's an increasing danger that we are going to talk about in the workshops today. So, and any number of rivers in the world are being concretized now because that is called development. Anything that's concrete is called development. Can we unpack that brain damage to the world? And can we begin to say that no, concrete is not development, but green infrastructure is a higher form of development? How do you leverage social capital by leveraging culture and history? How do you use technology and social media? This is again a case in China, in Kashgar, where the Uyghur people are being really forced to lose their culture and their traditions, and all those yellow dots are actually surveillance cameras. So we can use social media for healthy urban development in a positive way or in a negative way. And that's why this moment is very, very critical for us all to think about the deeper issues. Who are we designing for? I'm going to just do I have 5 more minutes? Yes? So I'm going to take a few minutes and tell you about the work I do with our nonprofit. You already saw the work of URBS, User-Generated Cities, which I founded with 2 wonderful partners who have our office in Dharavi, actually. For the last 8 years, our office is in Dharavi. But I'll talk now a little bit about Asia Initiatives. It's another nonprofit that I founded. And really articulating the problem that we are simply looking at the economic, financial capital. We are not looking at ecological capital, social capital, and governance. So my dream, which you all have to make a reality, is that in future, when projects are calculated, the calculation is not just dollars. It's also social capital, it's ecological capital. How is it going to be governed? If we begin to mandate that the government says, I will not approve a plan unless you tell me what is it going to do to the social capital, ecological, then I think we are beginning to move in the right direction. So we developed this community currency for social good. We call it SOCS. And it's very simple that you do social good, you earn SOCS, and you can spend them on education, healthcare, and skill empowerment, because we work in a lot of poor communities in many countries, and that's what you need to get out of poverty or to improve your life, even if you're middle income and so on. So we are working in these countries now, and we have a method of Socratic dialogues. So we talk to the community. We have developed these card games, board games, so that through games we learn what the community needs and what are they willing to do for it. Because we believe that people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. So we do these Socratic dialogues. This is a project in Washington, D.C., and this is in Pune, where Pune-Mumbai Expressway, it's only 120 kilometers, but it has the highest death rate for that shorter highway anywhere in the world. So we are working with drivers to behavior change. We use persuasive technology for behavior change. And what that is we collect data on what people are doing, and then we try to tweak it. So that's our technology. So we create earning and redeeming menus, and this is people in a village working with us to design their public spaces. This is a competition we won for a new capital city in India of Amravati. And so Asia Initiative won the competition to energize people to participate in the design process and maintenance of public spaces. This is in Ghana, where a market was really filthy and not very attractive to customers. And so it was cleaned up, and women got socks for cleaning it up, sending daughters to school, getting health checks and planting trees, and they could get very low interest loan to improve their business. This is we did in Manyata, where huge garbage heaps were cleaned up and kitchen gardens were made. This was a very polluted river in South India, Madurai, and the question was that all these communities were informal communities on the side were dumping everything into the river. So we said, okay, let's divide the riverfront with those yellow lines into segments, and the community behind that becomes custodians of the river. So instead of polluting the river, you are now caretaker of the river, you earn socks for that, and slowly the river is recovering. We are helping plant trees. So you can do anything using incentivizing people to come together and do social good, which is what I call social capital. So injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so I invite you to think about things differently. To help us think differently are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. How many of you already know about these? Nice, very nice, very good, good, very good. And how many of you know about new urban agenda of the habitat? Yes? Less people, but good. So, that's really important that they're saying ensure access to all adequate, secure, and affordable housing. But development of human rights-based housing, right? That's social capital, human rights-based. Then transform society so housing is a means to ensure security and inclusion, not the opposite. When the Jim Crow things happened, the society was in the wrong direction. So now how do you turn societies to this direction? Ensure that housing social function is not displaced by speculative and corporate greed. Really, really important. So they're saying all the good things. How do you implement it? You implement it if you believe in it and you bring it in your work. That's it.
So please, we've got about 10 minutes or so for questions and the time left.
Okay. Okay. If nobody has questions, I will think I failed. Okay.
You said a good building is a building that if it, a whole city is a good building, it's a good city.
Yeah.
So what makes it a good city?
No. I said that a building, for me, is a successful building if many buildings like that would make a good city.
And what's a good city?
A good city is a city that empowers all its residents by providing them opportunities to rub shoulders with each other, to connect, to create those networks you need to succeed. It has public infrastructure that empowers you. If I don't own a car, can I get to the other side of town, right? And the feeling that we are in this together. That's what a city is really about.
Okay, so I have the same question. So like you said, always focus on like making social capital, but at the same time I think some from East Africa and the social trend in Egypt is to, like people in Egypt themselves want to move, like get rid of social capital and be more like build shopping centers and stuff like that. So how can you change people's perspective on like what's good and what's bad? Informality for them is better.
So this is exactly the challenge for all of you, for all the architects. So if, like you said, that hungry architect will build whatever the developer tells you to build. Okay. But can the hungry architect propose 2 or 3 alternatives and say, you asked me to do this, but look at this. It's the same kind of money, but the result is this, this, this. Or look at this. It's even cheaper or a little more expensive, and this is what you get. So I think that if we begin to tell our clients and our developers that, okay, if we calculate the social capital, ecological capital, and financial capital, look, you can go sell it to the whole world, right? It'll be a big marketing tool, because I think the consumer is beginning to change in that direction. Yeah. Yes. Okay, there's one other.
I just was waiting, so, building on what you just said, can you elaborate on your experience having been able to do that? The reason I'm asking is that I think the agency has to change.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the money that's defining
Yeah.
what the cities look like, rather than what's really needed. And it's because of the structural flow of money within the city, which is how tax money flows,
Yes.
to cover. So I think it's much more complex, and I think architecture needs to be a lot more multidisciplinary, as well as really understanding what you're so wonderfully explaining, that it's the people have to be represented,
Mm-hmm.
and not the capital.
Right.
Although it says, I mean, nobody will say, I'm here not to serve people. Of course everybody says, but the picture is louder than
Mhm.
1,000 words. It's defining
Yeah.
from it. So
Yeah.
this is a beautiful city is about when you can calculate, is it an applicable city?
Mhm. So I think this is maybe the most important question. And I just want to go back to the case of Brazil and Mexico. particularly Brazil. So they have a project called Mia Casa Mia Vida, My Life, My House, and government funded. So after all these mistakes and after, people were screaming, like people like me were screaming, what is this, what is this? And so now they mandate that the developer has to hire an architect if any of the government money is to be used. If any government money is used to rehabilitate even one building, they have to hire an architect. So this is one way of getting agency. But the other way of getting agency, and I want to go back to when the Gothic cathedrals and all were being built. Architects were going out and sourcing money, right? So maybe there can be, in this day and age, maybe there can be design bonds that a city can issue. That, okay, so there's a bond, and this bond is for money that will go to designers and architects for them to propose solutions that will be then publicly discussed, right? I mean, how powerful would that be, right? That's getting agency. And architects have to be, I suggest to many of my students that you should either become a developer or a politician, right? You already are an architect. Once you learn architecture, it will not go out of you. You are done for life. It will stay with you. But you can layer on top of that, how will you make money, right? So I suggest to every actually architecture school that there should be some courses for financial literacy on how the architect can also begin to have a share. Because I was telling Matthew when we were driving that architects come up with these great ideas and they put them on the table and they walk away and the developer comes and makes all the money, right? That has to change. That has to change. So you need to have equity in the projects. You have to demand equity in the project, and you can begin to do that, especially in government projects, from the government level, that should be mandated. There's a very amazing regulation that has been proposed by developers that, let's say a developer does a housing estate and goes away, but then if that changes or if that changes hands, if he must get royalty every time, not the architect, right? Should the architect be getting royalty every time? But forget about the royalty. I'm more interested that architects should have more like a longer term ongoing commitment to make sure that the project is maintained. Project IGU or any of the public housing in United States that's now dilapidated because it was built in 60s and 70s, if there had been a clause that the architect stays engaged and the architect makes sure that the maintenance is carried out and because needs change. So maybe the public space was here, but now it needs to be here. Now it needs to be, there are more younger people, so there are swings or whatever. So I think we need to ask for a bigger share on the table, an ongoing dialogue on the table, including architects, not excluded. So I think that's a longer debate, but I hope some of you will become politicians and very successful developers and make that happen. Yes. Oh, there are many hands. Okay. So you, and then you, and then you. Okay, let me do this. Let me take many questions, and then I'll answer together. So start with that.
Okay. So my question is that I'm outside of the school, I'm in social work, but interested in development. And my question was really good for you to share if you've ever experienced where you're trying to kind of give developers a more equitable, social justice, social capital oriented ideas, and they kind of just walk away and they say, like, we don't want to bother anymore. And how do you go about that? Or how have you done?
Too often. I will answer that. Okay, yes.
My question is about the social urbanism we talked about in Colombia. They came from 1990s murder capital to 2012, the most innovative city. And I'm wondering how they can afford to build this kind of like development, like this development, who afford this, like federal money came in or something. I'm really like.
Okay, where did the money come from? Yeah, more than money, it was a political will, and people understanding that okay, now this government is for us. But let me come back and answer more. Who else had their hands up? Yes.
This is in regards to your SOX program implementation, and maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but In regards to the businesses or programs that receive the SOX credit, like how are they funded in regards to the resources that they provide? Like how did you get those types of businesses to agree to be part of this business model? Because obviously, you know, when the people become stewards of their environment and their society, there's great environmental benefits and social benefits that those businesses, you know, also receive. But we live in a capitalistic world, so obviously there's like a money component involved. And I'm just curious how you satisfy them in that way.
Yeah. Matthew asked me exactly the same question. And so I'll give a longer answer, but the short answer is that we raise money for that. My foundation does. We also get corporate partners to do it, in some cases governments to do it. Like in Ghana, we are negotiating with the government that they will accept SOX as for electricity bills. And we've already done that in Costa Rica. There was one more hand, yes?
Yeah, I was wondering in terms of the approach toward building social capital, is that sort of the differences between different countries you kind of working on, or the approach or principle difference?
Yeah, so the basis is that everyone alive has some social capital. But your question is there more of it in some country? Amazingly, do you know St. Louis is so rich in social capital that in the whole country, like it's one of the poorest cities, but in terms of generosity and volunteerism and giving, right, you can speak to that it's one of the most generous cities. That's a surprise, right? But that's social capital. Let's talk more. One more? Yes.
So like I am the supporter of the free market. So like my
Oh no, hey guys, she said she's a supporter of free market. Let's give her a hand.
okay, so like my question is because you introduce a lot of like failed housing project to us, but there are also a lot of like failed projects proposed by architects. But to me, like the reason why I like the free market is because it has a evaluated standard, which means like when you build it, like the feedback is failed. So like they all do the same things next time, but it's really hard to evaluate like the architect's attitude, like that. Yeah.
No, that's so important. So important what you just said. That, and which is why the whole world, even China, who would have known that China will become the biggest supporter of free market, right? But it is because it works. It works. But then it works best when it is guided. So at the government level, there has to be guidance. So guided free market is absolutely great. There's nothing better than that. But when you let the free market go totally berserk, crazy, like in United States, then the problem that you're seeing today happen. So very serious conversation there, and also, maybe I didn't say it, but we just actually received one award, and we are hoping to receive the next one, is for developing a methodology to measure social capital. Social capital is not in the calculations because it is so hard to measure. If we can develop mechanisms, and SOX is just one mechanism, but that's needed. And were there any other questions? Yes.
Okay, my question is regarding the cities that you talked about, and most of these cities are first world countries and some are third world countries. So what is a good way to compare and learn from each cities, or what is the value we should look out for in terms of learning from the mistakes that happen, but at the same time the problems faced in in New York or in different cities is very different just because of the nature or the place it is in. And what is something that you first thing to solve, or the first thing you would look out for?
It is true that the problems are very different, but there are also major similarities. Like right now, the entire world has sort of bought into this neo-capitalist, hyper-capitalist model. And that is a problem because unbridled hyper-capitalism and free market is dangerous. So there are many similarities, but of course, every solution must come down to the ground. And that's why, at least in the small projects we are doing, there's this big emphasis on listening and Socratic dialogues with the people. If it's people, Okay, just think, what are the biggest problems in the world right now, right? The environment, it's, a disaster waiting to happen, actually. So on Monday, I'm speaking at the Asia Society on who owns water. This is such a serious issue, right? So these issues are actually universal right now. They are big issues that impact the developed and the developing countries. So if you think about the macro issues, I think they are quite similar. And we just have to learn from each other, and we have to get our act together and point directions the right way. I mean, the amazing thing would be, can we get the free market to focus on, let's say, environmental sustainability, social capital? Then we are talking. Any other questions are more important than answers.
I have a question. I'm not an architect, I'm an anthropologist. I work in central.
Good for you.
Thank you. You're the first person that said that. So I have a question about the Le Corbusier idea of his writings on architectural revolution. And it spoke back to your evocation of speculative urbanism. Now, I understand speculative urbanism has its origins in Marxian urban theory from Michael Goldman, actually, his writings on Bangalore. And he's actually very critical of some of the organizations that he cited at the end, specifically UN Habitat, but also the World Bank and IFC. And so I guess my question is, one of his arguments is that as I understand it, the World Bank and the United Nations through structural adjustment created the very conditions for speculative urbanism to happen, and are now coming back in and solving the problem they created, and using more capital and to do that. So I guess my question is where you fit in that, but also the sort of, when you invoke Brazil, and I wasn't quite sure where you saw the architect's role, but also thinking about other urban uprisings that are happening across the world right now, Hong Kong, Chile, or wherever. Because it seemed like you were suggesting that architecture could actually forestall violence and forestall revolution in a moment when people are rising up against neoliberalism, some of the processes that you're critical of. So I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, the Brazil case is very interesting because after seeing the problems they created using the Minha Casa Minha Vida model, they mandated that architects have to be in the picture. So that's what I was referring to. But it is so unfortunate and so true that organizations like the World Bank and many like JICA, Japan International Development Agency, China International Development, they are creating super big problems. We were working with Petra, we worked in Ghana and Kenya, and they are building ring roads. Okay, so here's a small city, you want to build a ring road. Why? I will not understand, but then people find out that you're going to build the ring road, they quickly buy up the land. Now it's too expensive, so they move the ring road further. And further, and further. So now they are creating space for speculation and completely ridiculous kind of a decentralized city. So they have caused serious problems because those bureaucracies are so big that once they understand something, they get stuck on that and they cannot move, and the urban situations move so rapidly. So I completely agree with you. They should completely get out of the game. Urban development game, but so much damage is happening in Africa right as we speak to their cities through good intentions of the World Bank, not IMF. IMF does different things, but the World Bank, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, and the China International Cooperation Agency. It's really going to be amazing time if it's ever healed, but the damage is being done right now. Yes. 1 minute.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I want to piggyback on what you said, and it's to do with whether architects can make the change directly. I think it's more a matter of cultivating what you are showing, that who do we serve, and sort of being the activists on the ground, for the design activists, and it's going to be tough. For example, the traditional way of paying traders in architect hasn't changed for hundreds of years, right? It's just this very straight path, you come on, you do your thing, and then you have a especially in America, hundreds of thousands of dollars before you get a job. And usually the offices are serving some developers because that's where the most money comes, right? So I think it's the activity that's the problem, and just saying that you're an activist isn't enough. It's mobilizing. We need to learn additional skills to mobilize the communities. Number one. Number two, I think it's a matter of, I don't know how to explain this, but if say I worked a lot on this, I'm sure you know the shrinking cities problem. And if you have a government that's already low on tax income, they go bend backwards in the city to win
Anything.
any come. I can't come. I give you this free and that free, and you bring me
Yeah,
jobs.
yeah,
And
sure.
so I think the problem is so complex, sort of at the leadership level in a country that really hates having regulatory government, because you hear it. No big government. We hate big government. So you have no regulation. You have so the top isn't functional. The leadership has no money in the sort of cities that are challenged. And then there is so much social capital that nobody puts their soul to invest in what's most actually most an asset. Like
Yeah, that's the biggest
human
asset.
capital. How do we overcome? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to kind of.
No, you are.
Jasmine, so what's your question?
I was just saying that it's not, I guess the question is the architect is not alone, cannot alone do that.
That's not the question. What's the question for her?
I was just saying that it's a little bit that it's just the architect who do
Okay, so
that.
there's no question.
No, but you know, it's an important conversation, because how do we get into, how do we go higher on the food chain? Influence policy and influence the money flow. I think that's an important skill. So that's it. So I thank you very, very much. So for those of you whose questions I couldn't answer, I can still maybe afterwards. And during the workshop, I'll have chance to talk to you. So big thank you.